here to show you our mystery stamping slimline card. Apologies that we were not able to meet yesterday, but due to another event that Bruce and I attended, I know I had mentioned that I would share a video with you, and I am doing that obviously right now. So I'm going to jump in because I want to show you what we are going to do. We're going to be making a slimline card. Lots of different ways to make a slimline card. And I'm not going to show you the cards until we're a little bit farther down the path. So we're just going to go. We're just going to get started here. And the way that I like to make a slimline card is I use one piece of 8.5 by 11 inch paper. This is thick basic white. And for the card that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to show you two versions actually. But the thick paper is definitely going to be a little bit more sturdy and will support the card a little bit better. So for my slimline cards, the way I like to do this is I'm going to put the paper in so that the 11-inch side is horizontal. And all I'm going to do is cut off 3 inches. So I'm going to that 3-inch line, and I'm just going to cut off 3 inches. Don't throw this away because we're going to use that as part of the front of the card. And what we're going to end up with now is a piece of paper that is 8 inches long. We cut off 3 from the 11. So we have 8 inches here, and it's 8.5 inches in this direction. So I'm going to take this is going to be my base for the card. And what I'm going to do is on the 8-inch side, I'm going to score that in half. So obviously that means I'm going to score at 4 inches. I'm just going to bring in my little scoring board right now and put my paper in, and you can see that I've got it on the 8-inch side. And I'm going to just score that at 4 inches. And because this is the thick cardstock, let me go back over that just one time. And I'll grab my little bone folder out of here. And what we've done is we've taken an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, and we've created our slimline base. I'm going to go ahead and burnish this. This is going to be the size of the card. And this will fit perfectly into a business size or an A10 envelope. And that's really what I'm aiming for. So I've got my card base. It is 8.5 inches wide, 4 inches tall. And then I'm going to use this piece as part of the front of the card. So I had mentioned in the supplies to have ready for this mystery stamping that you needed one piece of the base color cardstock at 8.5 by 11, and this is why. So this is what we just made with that. One of the other pieces that I suggested that you have is a piece of color cardstock, and obviously choose the color that you want. I chose cherry cobbler. I love, love, love cherry cobbler as far as holidays, and this is going to be a holiday Christmas themed card. So I've got cherry cobbler. This is 8.5 inches by 3.5. You're getting the theme here. We've got 8.5 inches, and you're going to see that again when we get to the other layer. So 8.5 by 3.5. All right, so that's a piece of cardstock. And then for the designer series paper, I want to tell you why I chose this. And I'm going to show you the stamp set and the dies that I used to make my card. And it will become clear in a minute why I chose this piece. When I was looking through the holiday catalog for the whatever at the time, and I came to page 40, this is where it is. There is an amazing, amazing stamp set and dies. They're called the Bright Baubles Bundle. And I overlooked these the first couple of times that I went through. But what I decided was that for this card, since there's going to be a lot of area that I can put my design, I wanted to have some kind of bold images. And I thought that the ornaments and some of the other items that are in that bundle, and I'll show those to you in a minute, would work perfectly. And I just sort of looked at how much area I have, and it's quite a bit, really. It's going to be the full 8.5, and then I've got some freedom to go beyond the borders. I can do whatever I want. So I've got 8.5 by 4 inches that I can play with. So I started thinking, well, what if I could find a piece of designer series paper that sort of looked like, the background would look like a tree, like a Christmas tree with boughs. And what I ended up doing is I found this piece, and let me show you the other side. This is from the unbelievably beautiful Painted Christmas designer series paper. So I've taken one of those pieces, it's actually this one right here, and this is going to be another layer on the card, and it's really nice. And what's really nice about it is I'm going to show you that I made one card that is a landscape view, and the boughs don't have an up or down, so it's a beautiful background. And then I made another one that is a vertical view, and again, the pattern goes really well. So this is eventually how I'm going to build the background for the card. So again, I started thinking about, okay, what kind of fun things can I do? And I just started playing. And I invite you, when you think about putting a card together like this, allow yourself the grace to play, to come up with an idea, to test it, to see if you love it, you hate it, whatever. But just take some time and play around with it. So I really enjoyed using a lot of the elements in the bundle. And in particular, I was really intrigued by the many, many dies that come in this bundle. And so I got the dies out, and you can see there are a ton of different shapes. There are some that have words. This says Merry and Bright. This one says Joy. And there's just so much you can do. You can also cut out a little hanger that you can use to simulate that you're hanging the ornaments from a tree. So I started playing, and I decided to mix and match a little bit in terms of what I was going to put on my card as far as ornaments. And mixing and matching, what I mean by that is die cuts and stamping and just different things. So one of the first things I did is I thought, I want to use this stamp. And again, I'm bringing back the cherry cobbler. So I stamped that image with cherry cobbler, but I didn't want to just have a plain background. And you can see that this is on designer series paper. Well, lo and behold, this is on another sheet from that designer series paper collection. And it was perfect. It's this one right here. And again, this is the Painted Christmas designer series paper. And it was really perfect because it added just a little bit of background, not a whole heck of a lot. So I went ahead and I stamped that, and then I thought, okay, what do I need to do with that? And I decided that I was going to put it on a piece of cherry cobbler. You've got a theme going here, the cherry cobbler. But I didn't want to just cut out this stamped image with the die that cut this out. And let me tell you why. Let me show you why. If I had cut out that image with this die, I'm going to have a little bit of a border, and that border is going to be the designer series paper. And I decided I wanted to kind of carry the theme through of the framing that I had done on the front of the card. So I die cut that ornament die from Cherry Cobbler, and then I fussy cut this. Now, fussy cutting and I have a love-hate relationship. There are times when I'm good with it, and honestly, on something like this, it's a no-brainer. It's a circle. It's not a big deal. And it cuts very easily. You've got a really one line image that you're cutting out until you get up to the top where you've got the little hanger at the top of the ornament. But it's really not too bad to cut out. And again, I really wanted to have that Cherry Cobbler background when I got done. So I just cut this out, and as I was cutting it out, I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to have this ornament. What else can I do? And I started looking around my craft room and some of the paper, and you'll see in a minute some of the ornaments that I just started using the dies, and I just had a really great time with different color combinations that I'll show you, and some of the different dies that are in the set, and started to literally just crank out pieces from my die cutting machine, and then I laid them out. But it was a process. It was one where I really just wanted to think about, what can I do? How can I use the space that will be on this card to fill it in an interesting way, so that it will be appealing, but it will also have kind of a really fun sort of look. All right, so that is fussy cut. And one thing that I like to do when I do images like this is, for example, right here, I cut a little bit close in and you can't see the outline as well. And there are some other areas where there might be a little bit of the designer series paper that's still showing over the edge. You can see that a little bit better right there. If you take a marker for the color that you have stamped and you trace around the edge, you can fill that in. When you do that, flip your piece over, you inevitably will make a little bit of a mark on the side that you're looking at. And if you do that, like I just did right there, you would probably not be too happy with yourself, because that would interfere with the design on the side that you've stamped. So if you turn it over and you just make sure that you're going right along the edge and you get that color so that you're filling in the blank, so to speak, where you don't have that ink on the outside, you're going to get a nice clean image that you can put down on your complimentary cardstock. So you can see I've definitely added in, and I'm just going to touch it up just a teeny bit. I've added in where that area was that's blank, and the places where you could see the designer series paper that no longer shows. I'm going to give that just a second to dry, and while I do that, I want to show you some of the other pieces that I cut out using the dies. So I decided I wanted to do a little bit of bling, and I used some of the brushed metallic cardstock and cut out some pieces for ornaments. I also wanted to bring in another color into this card, and that color I chose as Evening Evergreen. And to me, the combination of Cherry Cobbler and Evening Evergreen is almost classic in terms of Christmas. They're not bright reds and greens. They're muted. They're just, I think, beautiful. So these are two of the colors that I decided to really feature in the card. And the way that I did that was, if we go back to the dies, I decided for this card that instead of any more stamping on the front, so this is the stamping that you're going to see on the card, I wanted to really highlight the words that are in the dies. And I had a choice. And obviously you can see I chose Merry and Bright. And again, this is just a big, bold ornament that will be really, really pretty on the card. And then I want to show you the other ornament that has the words. This is one that's called Joy, and it is a circle die. A little hard to read backwards, but it has a lot of very fun and detailed parts that come into play when you use that die. Let's talk about these dies for just a second, and I want to give you a really quick tip that you may or may not know is when you have some intricate dies like this, you have probably in your pantry in the kitchen a tool that you can use that will help you get a nice clean cut on some intricate dies like this. It's wax paper. So if you have an intricate die like this one, and I cut these with wax paper, here's how I do my sandwich. I've got my platform, I've got a plate, I'm going to put the paper that I would use to cut the die, then I'm going to put a piece of wax paper, and the die goes on top of the wax paper, and then the plate goes on top of that. What happens is the wax from the paper acts as a lubricant, and it really helps get those small pieces that we all have challenges with to come out much more easily. And it lubricates your die so that it can be a little bit easier to use the second or third time that you use it. And you don't always have to use the wax paper. It's just a good thing to start with. So I ended up with 3 different ornaments, and this is called dry fitting. It's not wet fitting. Wet fitting means when you start gluing things together and you really are putting your card together. Dry fitting is when you still have all the pieces unassembled, but you start stacking them and figuring out what you're going to do with them. And this is where I just started to play. Before I even put things together, I just started to play around and think about, how do I want this to work? And again, I invite you to do this because it can be very therapeutic. It can really help you come up with some fun and different patterns. And it can also help you just think about a design that you had in your head and how you can make it come to life with paper. A couple other dies that I used from the set, actually one more, is the hanger. And I just decided to cut out quite a few different hangers in different colors. I had some silver paper. I did one in cherry cobbler. I did a couple from the brushed metallic cardstock, and I just have these on hand because, again, I'm going to kind of play around with them and see how it all comes together. Just going to get those out of camera for a minute. And the last thing that I have that I went ahead and cut and prepared are a couple of strips from the brushed metallic cardstock pack. And these are 1/4 of an inch wide. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with them, but I will show you what I ended up doing. All right, so let's start getting things together here. I am going to put these 3 pieces together first. And the reason is I'm actually going to use this as the primary focal point and sort of finish off some of this design before I put everything on top of the card. Now, for those of you who know me well, you know that oftentimes I will use a piece of cardstock that's going to get hidden. This is all going to be hidden. You're only going to see the edges of the cherry cobbler. So you've got room in here if you wanted to do die cutting. For example, I could die cut some hangers out of the middle of this piece and no one would ever know. I could die cut some of the circles. They will actually fit without a problem. Just make sure you get them pretty centered. And you can die cut those pieces out before you put this down. But for sake of simplicity, I'm just going to start putting this together. So the pieces that you have, what I would suggest is take the piece that was extra when we made the base and put that onto the colored cardstock that you have. So this is your 3.5 by 8.5. This is the 3 by 8.5, and I'm just going to try to get it centered. You are going to find, and give yourself grace, you are going to find that when you cut 2 pieces of paper and you are trying to cut them at 8.5, you're not going to have the exact same length. Let it go. You can see here, I can see on either side a smidge of that cherry cobbler. That's fine. It looks great. So I'm just going to put that in the middle. And I'm going to go ahead and also add on my designer series paper. And again, this may or may not be exactly 8.5 inches long. I'm good with that. If it's really far over, I'll do some trimming from the back, but I'm betting it will be okay. Just going to turn that over and going to put that on the front. And again, I'm just going to try and get it in the middle. What's nice about this design, as an example, is there will be some other visual pieces on the front, so I'm really not going to have to worry about getting everything perfectly centered. All right, so I have my centerpiece. Play. And this is what I did when I played. I decided that I wanted to have a little bling up at the top and down at the bottom. And what I did is I just brought back in a couple of those pieces of the metallic, brushed metallic cardstock, and I'm just going to add them to the top and the bottom. And again, you know, this is where I had some fun. I wasn't really sure where I was going to end up, and half of the fun is the journey to get there. I am going to bring in a piece of paper so I don't get glue all over the back. And you're going to see some little glue marks over on the right. And I'm just going to take this piece. I might put a little bit more glue. I don't know if I have quite enough on here to get it all the way over. And I'm going to lay that at the top, but I'm going to bring it in just a smidge from the side. So maybe about like that. And with this paper, the brushed metallic, you do have to, I'm actually raising this just to make sure I have it about even on both ends. The brushed metallic, you do have to just condense it, and it just takes a second to make sure that it knows that it needs to stay where you're putting it. And give it a good press. And then I'm going to come from the back, use my scissors, and just snip off the excess. I really like this metallic paper, and it goes a long way. You can get quite a few pieces cut, and if you are really deliberate, you can get quite a few die cuts. Even the scraps will work. And I have enough that I don't need to use another one of the pieces that I've cut out, so I'm just going to add that to the top as well, or the bottom, whichever one this is going to end up to be. And again, I'm going to try and get it at about the same distance from the edge that I did on the other side. And I'm going to show you two cards like I mentioned. One of them has an awful lot of this cardstock. I started with an idea of doing a woven card with, you know, just different layers of color and different metallics that would be woven on each side. I haven't given up on that idea. I just changed my mind as I was working through this. And that's half the fun too. You know, oftentimes I'll have an idea, I'm sure you guys do this too, where you've got an idea, you start it, it's not exactly what you thought it might be, so you change. That's good. Flexibility is a good thing. This little guy is being cantankerous. I want to get him straight. So again, sometimes you just need to convince this, and I'm just giving it a nice little press on the side. And I'm going to trim that off. All right. So, got a little bit more of my base. Got my metallic pieces that are on either side. And again, you know, at this point I was thinking, do I want this to be landscape? Do I want it to be vertical? I decided the one that I'm showing you right now that I wanted it to be vertical. And I'm going to build what I made. And I just want to give you one other quick tip before I get to the building part. So you saw all the pieces that I cut to make the ornaments. And one thing that I find frustrating sometimes is putting a piece like this with a lot of detailed die cut onto a solid background. I like to use liquid glue, and sometimes what can happen is if you put too much liquid glue, it squishes out when you put it onto your background piece. Well, here's a tip. Get your liquid glue. I know I could die cut this on the sticky paper, but honestly I was just on a little path to get the die cuts done. And what I'm doing is I'm strategically putting some glue. I'm not putting an awful lot at all, and I'm not going to put it all over. You don't need to. If you put the glue in areas that are on the edge, and not even all around the edge, just parts of the edge, but go into areas that are bigger, the leaves on this have some really nice area, so I can put a little bit more glue in there. And I just want to make sure that I'm definitely getting some on the sides. I'm not doing a lot here, but I've got some glue on there. Now, I'm not going to just turn that over and plop it down onto the background. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over on a scrap piece of paper, and you can see there are places where I've already done this. And I'm going to put this down and lightly tap it and then pull it up. And that has taken some glue off, but more importantly, it is not going to have a blob of glue that would squish out and really cause a problem. So I just laid that down. There's still plenty of glue on the back of that to make it adhere. And I'm just burnishing it a little bit on the other side. And there you go. It's nice and flat. It's not going anywhere. I did the same thing for this ornament, so I have those all ready. And then the other ornament that we need to get together is the one that was stamped. And this one, because it's a solid piece, I'm really not going to worry about the technique that I just showed you. I'm going to go ahead and just put glue on the back of that ornament and then stick that straight down to the piece that I die cut. And I like that border. I just think it gives it a little bit more definition, and it kind of brings it all together, in my opinion. All right, so let's move to getting more toward putting this card together. I'm going to bring in another piece of just some scratch paper in the background. So here's where I said, okay, I've got these 3 ornaments. And you obviously will have different pieces in your collection that you'll want to use. And I thought, how can I do this? How can I make this work? And how can I get enough room? Because these are big. So this is kind of the design that I ended up with. And I'm going to show you, let's see, this one comes down about here. And this eventually is going to go onto the card. I'm not putting it on here just yet, but I can see when I put that front on my card base, I do have more area because I can go beyond the cherry cobbler. I can make this go a little bit further out to the side, which is great because I can use even more space to put these on. So I thought, that's not bad. That's kind of fun. So how can I make this look like they're hanging on this sort of tree background? And that's where these hangers came into play. So the hangers are really cool. They're really fun. And they go on very, very easily. You just put a little bit of glue on the back. Don't need a lot. And you can use these in a really cool design to give the ornaments different heights. This I am going to I've got my blotter piece over to my right, so I just blotted off a little bit of that glue, not quite as much. And if I just put that up at the top and just hold it here for a second. So I was thinking, okay, I've got this one ornament that's sort of going to be hanging here, but if I've got this other one down here, the hanger is only so long, and I really want it to look like it's hanging all the way from the top. This is going to be my visual, that metallic piece at the top is where I'm going to hang everything from. But how would I do that if I have this ornament down at the bottom? Because if I have this hanger, it's only going to go that high. Well, there is a solution. And the solution is that you can take another hanger and you can cut off the piece that looks like the wire or the thread or whatever you want to call it. And you can actually just glue that visually so that when you put another ornament on, it looks like this ornament is hanging all the way from the top. That's pretty cool. That actually really works, and it's a really good optical view for that. So that's what I ended up doing. And I just played around and figured out, where do I want these ornaments to be? How do I want them to look? And at what height do I want everything to show? I am not going to bore you to tears with the gluing, because this is really where this is at this point, is gluing. And I'll show you the final card in just a second. But this is about where I put the ornaments. And at this point, I would have also glued. And let me go ahead and do that, because I am going to use this as a card. I'll put those back in just a minute. So before you put your ornaments down, make sure that you go ahead and add your focal point to the front of your card. It's just going to be easier. Once you've decided that that's where you're landing, go ahead and put that focal point on the front. And you can figure out which way you want, up and down. I mean, honestly, on this one, it really doesn't matter. And again, since theoretically the card is 8.5 and everything else is 8.5, There may be some little smidgy differences. It's okay. And there are some differences on this one, but by the time you get it together, no one will know. And if you're super crazy, you can come back in and trim this off if you wanted to, because you can see that's just a little bit wider than the piece of white paper, but it's fine. So I'm just going to kind of build this visually back up and share one more little piece of info, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you the final card that I put together with this design, and then I'll show you one more. So that's going to end up being something like that and straight. And then this one's going to come in here and probably have, oh, let's see, what kind of hanger do I want on that? We'll bring in this one. And I am going to cut off the excess on the hanger, so it will all look like they're hanging right at the edge of that top piece. So it's going to look something like this. This one gets pulled up on dimensionals just to give it a little bit more. And then I looked at this and I thought, this looks naked down here. And I really wanted to have something in addition. So I used some retired paper. This is some plaid paper that we had, it might have been last year, it could have been 2 years ago. It's called Wrapped in Plaid, and it was a 6x6 designer series paper pack. And then I wanted to put a topper on here. I wanted it to look like it was an ornament. So I just popped that ornament die back into my machine, used some brushed metallic cardstock, and all I really wanted was that piece that looks like the hanger at the top. So I'm just going to trim off the excess, and then I'm going to put it together so that the ornament looks like that. And it was just enough. This die that I used to cut the ornament is from the Tasteful Touches dies, and it's not a plain circle. It has a nice little pattern on the outside. And it just gave a little finishing touch. I thought it was kind of fun. And I'm going to do the same thing here, where I'm going to put a bow. And then I'm going to use another piece that's just going to be that wire and put that up here so it looks like that ornament is also hanging from the top. So let me show you what my final card looked like that I put together initially. And here it is. So you can see I did exactly what I just showed you, and the front one is popped up, and the wires, the hangers, whatever you want to call them, are all ending at the bottom of that piece that is the brushed metal at the top. So they all look like they're hanging from that top piece. And it really gives a sense of vertical. It all just is working together well. And I was pleased with the way this ended up, because to me it looks like there are a lot of ornaments that are hanging on a tree. And that's what I see when I look at a decorated Christmas tree. So this is one version of what I did for this kind of card. And then another version that I put together is a landscape card. And I just want to touch on this for just a minute. This one is a little different, and I'll put the two together in just a moment. Obviously it's landscape versus vertical, but it's all the same measurements, all the same base. I use the exact same cherry cobbler. The extra piece from the card base is the white, and I use the exact same designer series paper, exact same dimensions. And on this one, it's a little more simple, with one ornament hanging, the one that I also used on the other with the stamped image. These are the brushed metallic adhesive backed dots on the front. And then I also put a couple more little blingy embellishments to really make it pop. Many more of the metallic stripes, I guess we can call them that, are on here. To me, this looks like a package that is wrapped up under the tree for somebody to open. The sentiment is from the Bright Baubles, Merry & Bright, and that was stamped in the Evening Evergreen. And then I use some of my absolutely favorite dies, the stitched rectangular dies, to do the die cutting for Merry & Bright, and also the cherry cobbler that's around it. And if you were to look at the real cherry cobbler piece on here, it has the die cut for the ornament and the die cut for this rectangle taken out of it. You'd never know. And this is up on dimensionals, this is up on dimensionals, and then here the hanger is from the top of the card. So I just made sure it was flush with the top. So these, I think, are just some really fun slimline cards. They will fit perfectly into an A10 envelope, the ones that we use for business mailings. And they're just bright and cheerful, and I hope you were inspired by this, and I really hope you give this slimline design a try. If you don't have these stamps and dies, find some that will work for your design. And obviously this can be used for any occasion. But I look forward to seeing what you make, and I hope you enjoy this. So please post what you do, and we can all see your beautiful creations. Thanks, guys. See you soon.